Hello students. So let's review on how to add rational numbers. But before that, make sure you watch the video on rules for adding integers, okay? So to add rational numbers, use the same rules that you use for adding integers. So, and what are those rules? So if you add the same sign, what would you do? So if you add a positive plus a positive, you would do what? Yes, you're gonna add the magnitude and then you copy the sign, which is also a positive. You use the same sign. Oops, that's a positive. Okay. Now, if you add both negatives, yes, you add the magnitude and then you copy the sign, which is the negative. Okay? So again, same signs, add the magnitude, and the sign stays the same. Do not forget that. Now, what if it's different sign? So if it's a different sign, let's just say the positive has a bigger magnitude than the negative. So if you add a positive plus a negative, if this has a bigger magnitude, if the positive has a bigger magnitude, so what you're going to do is subtract the magnitude, the bigger magnitude minus the smaller magnitude, subtract, and then the sign is what? Positive. Good. Copy the sign of the bigger magnitude. When you say magnitude, it's the absolute value. Okay? Now, what if you have a smaller magnitude of a positive and you're adding a larger negative of a magnitude? So your answer would be a negative, but make sure that you subtract the magnitude of these two terms. Okay? Again, same sign, you add, sign stays the same, different sign, you subtract the magnitude and copy the sign or use the sign of the bigger magnitude. Now, if you add opposites, that would surely equal to 0. Let's try it out. Number 1, it says -1/2 plus -3/5. Now, I do hope that you remember how to add fractions, because when you add fractions, we need to have the same denominator, okay? Now, what would be the common denominator between the 2 and the 5? And yes, you're right, it's 10. How do we get 10? Just a quick review. If you skip count 2, you get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 5, 5, 10. So the common multiples of 2 and 5, the least common multiple is 10. All right, so don't forget that. So how do we get the 2 to become 10? So we multiply by 5. So 2 times 5 is 10. So whatever you do in the denominator, you do in your numerator. So that's going to be -1 times 5. That would be a -5. If you can't see that, let me zoom in a little bit. There you go. Hopefully that's better. Okay, now that's a positive. Now 5 times something gets you 10. So that's 5 times 2. So negative, don't forget the negative sign, 3 times 2. So -3 times 2, that gives you a -6. Now look at this. The signs are the same. They have the common denominator, which is 10. The signs are the same. So that means we use, the sign stays the same. And then you add the magnitude. 6 plus 5 is 11. Denominator stays the same. So the answer is -11 over 10. Now, when you put that into your answer in Big Ideas, it might ask you to write a mixed number because it's in simplest form. So how many tens can fit in 11? That's going to be 1 time -1 over -1. So 10 times 1 is 10. 1 left, making 11. So this will be your answer. Okay, hopefully that helps. Just review it if you need to. Number 2, if you want to answer this first, you can pause the video. If not, then just listen on how, and listen and take notes if you need to on how to answer this. What's the common denominator? If you skip count 7 and 4, the least common multiple is 28. Okay? Now, what did you do to 7? What did you multiply to 7 to get 28? That's going to be times 4 times 4. The same thing, what did you multiply to 4 to get 28 times 7 times 7? So now 1 times 4 is 4 plus negative 3 times 7. That's going to be a negative 21. Now, we have the same denominator, 28. Will our answer be a positive or negative? Look at the magnitude first. Which has a bigger magnitude? 21. And the sign is negative and the other one's positive. The signs are different. So the rule says that we need to subtract and copy the sign of the bigger magnitude. So subtract 21 minus 4, that gives us negative 17. Now remember, when we subtract the bigger magnitude minus the smaller magnitude. Then copy the sign of the bigger magnitude. Okay, next is number 3. Let's do a mixed number. Again, change the mixed number into a improper fraction. So that's 3 times 5, that's 15. 15 plus 1, that gives us 16 over 3. Okay, plus negative 5 over 9. What is the common denominator of 3 and 9? And you're absolutely right. It is 9. So what did you multiply to 3 to get 9? Times 3 times 3. 16 times 3. If you multiply that, 16 times 3, you will get 3 times 6 is 18. Carry 1. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. So that's going to be 48 plus a negative 5. This stays the same because 9 times 1 is 9. So we're not touching that. So now, if you can see, the signs are different. So we subtract. So 48 minus 5 is 40. What was it? Yes, 43 over 9. Now remember, the sign is a positive because 48 has a bigger magnitude. So let's change this into a mixed number. How many 9 can fit into 43? And we know it's 4 whole 9s to fit into 43. And what do we need to make it into 43? Because 9 times 4 is 36. We need 7 more. Okay, so that will be your answer for number 3. All right, now let's do some decimals. Okay, so let's do this. So we have negative 10.9 plus 1.65. Now, for me, it helps when you try to write the sign of the answer. Is it positive or negative? As you can see, the signs are different. Which has a bigger magnitude? It's 10.9. And the sign is negative, so I copy the sign of the negative. I know my answer is a negative. Okay? Now I do know that the signs are different, so that means we need to subtract. So let's subtract. So 10, bigger magnitude first, 10.9 minus 1.65. Now, one thing to remember again when you're doing this is to line up your decimal place value, okay? So if I were to draw lines like this, so my tens are lined up, my hundreds are lined up, my ones are lined up, my decimal points are lined up. Make sure they're all lined up. Now, you can write a 0 on top of 5 as a placeholder so you won't get confused. Now, let's try this out. 0 minus 5, can you take away 5 from 0? Of course not. So you borrow from 9. So 9 becomes an 8, and the 0 becomes a 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5. And then 8 minus 6 is 2. And decimal point, bring it down, don't forget. Now, can you take away... Well, you can actually see this as 10 minus 1. You can just put 9 right away. But if you want to be technical, so you can't take away 1 from 0. So 0 becomes a 10, and the 1 becomes a 0. Technically the same thing. So 10 minus 1 is 9. So now if I did not write my negative answer at the top, I would assume that my answer is a positive 9.25, which is not. The answer is a negative 9.25. So that's why I write my sign first to make it easier for me to remember what my answer was. Now, let's try to do number 5. We got negative 2.15 plus 4.35. So if we do this, the signs are different. So that means I need to subtract and copy the sign of the larger magnitude. And I know it is a positive, all right? So let me subtract the bigger magnitude first, 4.35, minus the smaller magnitude. Okay, now let's subtract. 5 minus 5, 0. 3 minus 1, 2. The decimal point, don't forget, 4 minus 2 is 2. So the answer is a positive 2.2 or 2.20. Don't forget that. Now, if you want to answer number 6 on your own, you can pause the video. If not, and just continue playing the video. The signs are the same. Oh, the signs are the same. That means we add the magnitude and use the same sign, or the sign stays the same, which is a negative. So add them up. 3.75. Add up to 1.9. Then placeholder 0. Don't forget, line them up. This is just a placeholder. So 5 plus 0 is 5. That's going to be 16. And that's going to be 3, 4, 5. It's going to be 5.65. So the answer is negative 5.65. So hopefully that's clear. Number 7. If you have 3 terms, the best way is to use the commutative property of addition. That means you move the terms in any order, you'll still get the same answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer these positive first, make it easier. So I'm going to rewrite this. You don't have to if you know how to add right away. Now make sure you also copy the negative, because the negative doesn't stay in the middle. It stays with 7.2. Now I'm going to add this too. So 2.4 plus 1.3, that's going to give you what? The 7, it's going to be 3.7. Okay. Now bring this down, plus a negative 7.2. Now don't forget, the signs are different. So that means we subtract and we copy the sign of the bigger magnitude, which is the negative 7.2. So the answer is a negative, but we subtract the bigger magnitude minus the smaller magnitude. There you go. Now this becomes, can you take away 7 from 2? Nope. So you borrow from 7. The 7 becomes a 6, and the 2 becomes a 12. 12 minus 7 is 5. The decimal point, 6 minus 3 is 3. So the answer is a negative 3.5. Okay, easy. Next one is a word problem. Let me minimize this. There you go. All right. So the temperature is negative 12.6 degrees Celsius, and the temperature goes up 7.9 degrees. What is the new temperature? Goes up means that we're gonna add 7.9. So negative 12.6, add 7.9. So the signs are different, and yes, we subtract and add and copy the sign of the bigger magnitude, which is 12.6. So the sign is negative. Now let's subtract 12.6 minus 7.9. Make sure you line up all the decimal place values properly. We can't take away 9 from 6. That becomes a 16. This becomes a 1. 16 minus 9, that gives us a what? Absolutely 7. And then the decimal point. Now we can't take away 7 from 1. You borrow from 1. This becomes a 0. This becomes an 11. So 11 minus 7, that gives us a 4. So the answer is the new temperature would be negative 4.7 degrees Celsius. Okay. So I can't even spell that. Okay, Celsius. Now, let's do the last one. The last one. You finish 3/8 of a project. Your friend finishes 1/4 of a project. What fraction of the project is finished? So just add them up. So 3.8 plus 1/4. So the common denominator would be what? Absolutely, it's going to be 8. If you skip count 8 and 4, the least common multiple is 8. So we multiply 4 by 2, 1 by 2. 4 times 2 is 8. 1 times 2 is 2. We add them up. Now 8 stays the same because 8 times 1 is 8. So 3 times 1, so just multiply by 1 is 3. So 3 plus 2 is 5 over 8. So that's the final answer. So the fraction of the project that is finished is 5/8 of the project. Hope that helps.